Welcome to our channel. We're so glad you're here. If you love inspiring and real life stories about courage, discipline, and the incredible moments that make a difference, you're in the right place. Before we dive into today's story, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss tomorrow's powerful story. We bring you new stories every day, so stay tuned for more inspiring tales you won't want to miss. A drunk man provoked a royal guard. You won't believe what happened next. On a crisp afternoon outside Buckingham Palace, Sergeant Chris Williams, a 28-year-old British royal guard, stood at his post, unwavering in his discipline. The golden rays of the setting sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones as tourists gathered around, their cameras ready to capture the iconic sight of the royal guard. Chris had been here countless times, but today was like every other day. His boots, polished to perfection, were firmly planted on the ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of history. His gaze remained fixed forward, not betraying any reaction to the crowd's excitement. For 7 years, Chris had owned his discipline and composure. 2 tours in Afghanistan had shaped him into a man who understood the meaning of real danger. In the heat of battle, he had faced threats far greater than a few curious tourists. The scars on his left shoulder, hidden under his immaculate uniform, served as permanent reminders of those dangerous days. Yet, here at Buckingham Palace, his battlefield was different. The only things he faced now were camera flashes and whispers, but his discipline remained as unwavering as ever. As Chris stood, motionless, a steady burn began to build in his muscles. His shift had already lasted hours, and the discomfort of standing still was becoming familiar. But there was no room for fatigue or distraction. His job was simple: stand tall, remain stoic, and represent the values of the British Royal Guard. Families walked by, some pointing in awe, others trying to make him smile with jokes or waves. A couple from Japan bowed respectfully, capturing a perfect photo, while a group of teenagers from Italy snapped selfies, all with Chris as their backdrop. This moment of quiet admiration, however, would soon be interrupted. The scene, once calm and controlled, began to shift. A disturbance rippled through the crowd, and it wasn't long before Chris's focus was tested in ways he had never anticipated. The quiet reverence surrounding Buckingham Palace was suddenly pierced by a loud, slurred voice. "Move! Get out of my way!" The crowd parted reluctantly as a disheveled man staggered forward, his movements unsteady, his breath reeking of alcohol. Jack Miller, a 45-year-old man with a half-untucked business shirt and a tie hanging loosely around his neck, was clearly in no condition to be out in public. His eyes were bloodshot, his steps erratic, and yet he shoved past a family with a careless, almost violent force. The sharp smell of whiskey followed him, lingering in the air like a dark cloud. Chris, standing in his ceremonial posture, noticed the man's approach, his peripheral vision catching every detail. The drunken man's unsteady feet and trembling hands betrayed his agitation. But Chris remained stoic. He had been in far more dangerous situations now, and he wasn't about to let a drunken man distract him from his duty. The crowd grew tense, sensing that something wasn't right. The elderly couple near the front exchanged uneasy glances, their eyes fixed on the chaotic figure pushing his way toward Chris. "What's all this, then?" Jack shouted, gesturing wildly at the palace as if he had the right to question the grandeur before him. "Standing there like a bloody statue while the rest of us suffer." His words were slurred, each sentence stumbling out of his mouth as he fought to keep his balance. Chris kept his eyes fixed forward, not acknowledging the rant, but his mind was already processing the situation. This wasn't just a drunk man. This was someone whose emotions had reached a breaking point. Jack, now right in front of Chris, jabbed a finger in his direction, stopping just short of touching the guard's chest. "What do you think you're doing, huh? Sitting there in your fancy uniform while I've lost everything? My wife, my kids, my job." Jack's voice cracked slightly, the alcohol giving way to real pain for a brief moment, but it was quickly overshadowed by his anger. His finger hovered dangerously close to Chris's chest. The crowd was silent now, the tension thick in the air, as they all watched, unsure of what would happen next. Chris remained completely still, his body trained to handle moments like this with perfect discipline, The tension in the air grew thick as Jack continued to press closer, his anger mounting with every slurred word. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he shouted, his breath heavy with whiskey. The crowd stood frozen, some backing away slowly, while others watched in uneasy silence. Chris could feel Jack's presence looming over him now, his finger still hovering inches from his chest. His calm gaze never wavered, but his mind was calculating every possible move. His training had prepared him for danger, but the raw, unpredictable aggression from a drunk man was different. Jack was circling him now, his voice rising with each step. "You get paid to stand around looking like a puppet. People like me." He stopped mid-sentence, gesturing to the crowd. "We're the ones who actually matter. We're the ones struggling, not you." His words were venomous, fueled by years of frustration and the bitterness of failure. But the more he raged, the more his control slipped. His movements became erratic as he staggered dangerously close to Chris, forcing the guard to shift his focus. Chris's eyes never left Jack's, though his peripheral vision was tracking the movement of every tourist in the area. His jaw tightened, and for the briefest moment, his hand subtly gripped his rifle tighter, an automatic response to the escalating danger. Jack's words continued to pour out, each one more incoherent than the last, until finally the man's voice dropped to a whisper, full of raw venom. "You don't even know what it's like, losing everything." For a second, there was a flash of vulnerability in Jack's eyes, a glimpse of the man behind the rage. But before Chris could process it, the moment was gone, swallowed by the drunken fury once again. Jack's finger jabbed toward Chris's chest, this time not just an inch, but mere centimeters away, threatening to cross a line. Chris's military training had taught him how to handle dangerous situations, and this was no different. But the boundary was close, too close. The moment Jack grabbed his shoulder, something inside Chris snapped. His mind raced through his options, but his body reacted before his thoughts could catch up. His focus sharpened. Jack's grip tightened, and with a smooth, controlled motion, Chris stepped forward, locking eyes with the drunk man. This was it. The line had been crossed, and the situation was about to escalate beyond words. The moment Jack's hand landed on Chris's shoulder, the world seemed to freeze for just a second. The crowd held its breath, but Chris's body moved on instinct. His training kicked in, the years of military precision taking over as his mind calculated the situation in a split second. The touch had crossed a line, a direct physical violation of his space. Jack's drunken grip tightened, and Chris could feel the tension in his shoulder where the man's fingers dug into the fabric of his uniform. Without a flicker of emotion on his face, Chris shifted his weight, stepping into Jack's space, and in one swift motion, his hands shot up to break the grip. It wasn't a violent movement. No, it was precise, controlled, a textbook response honed from years of training in combat zones and ceremonial duties alike. Chris moved like a predator, fluid and fast. His arm wrapping around Jack's, securing it behind his back in a perfect restraint hold. The fluidity of the movement shocked everyone watching, leaving the crowd in stunned silence. Jack's face contorted in disbelief, his body jerking in an attempt to break free. But Chris's grip was unyielding, professional. He didn't respond with rage or anger. Instead, he maintained a calm, almost detached demeanor. "Remove your hand, sir," Chris said quietly, his voice firm but laced with authority. The words cut through the tension, and for a moment, it felt like the world had paused. Jack struggled weakly, his movements growing more erratic as his alcohol-fueled bravado wore thin. The onlookers were still, unsure of what would happen next, but Chris didn't flinch. He held Jack with effortless ease, his posture perfect, his breathing steady. The young mother who had hurried her children away stood frozen, watching in disbelief as the royal guard showed nothing but control. The elderly man with the military tie, who had been watching with concern, nodded in approval, recognizing the professionalism in Chris's actions. "You're being detained for assaulting a member of the Queen's Guard," Chris stated, his voice unwavering. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, spoken with such calm that it only added to the gravity of the moment. Jack's protests, muffled by the reality of his situation, became less frequent as he realized the severity of his actions. The security officers, alerted by the disturbance, approached quickly, their presence only reinforcing the finality of the situation. They took over, taking Jack away as Chris released him, stepping back into his perfect stance. The crowd, still processing what they had just witnessed, murmured among themselves. Many respected the guard's discipline, but others, shaken by the sudden violence of the moment, found themselves questioning just how far things had gone. As the security team led Jack away, Chris returned to his post, his uniform impeccable, his bearing unchanged. The whole episode was over in a matter of minutes, but the lesson lingered in the air. Respect for those who serve, in both ceremonial and real combat roles, is not just a matter of tradition, but of understanding the deep discipline it takes to perform such a duty, even when faced with unpredictable threats. As the security officers escorted Jack away, the tension in the air began to dissipate, but the crowd was still processing what had just unfolded before their eyes. Many stood frozen, some still clutching their phones, unsure whether they had witnessed a moment of necessary discipline or an escalation they could have never anticipated. A child, his wide eyes filled with confusion, tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Why did the guard do that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The mother, still in shock, gently reassured him. Sometimes people have to stand up for what's right. The elderly veteran, who had been standing on the edge of the crowd, moved forward, his eyes still on Chris. He walked with the confidence of someone who had seen much in his life, who understood the weight of service and duty. He stopped beside Chris, his voice low but filled with respect. "You did well, son," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of military experience. Chris gave a slight nod, his expression unchanged. He didn't need the praise. He didn't need the recognition. His duty was clear, and his actions spoke louder than words ever could. The security officers continued to lead Jack down the path, his struggles weakening as the reality of his situation set in. The crowd began to disperse, but there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. What had been a chaotic scene only moments before had now turned into a moment of reflection for many. The tourists who had once been caught up in the excitement of the palace now seemed quieter, more thoughtful. The royal guard, in all his stoic presence, had reminded them all of the true meaning of respect and discipline. As Jack was driven away, his head hanging low in defeat, the guard returned to his post, resuming his position with the same unwavering discipline he had held from the moment he arrived. His boots clicked against the cobblestones with a rhythm that seemed almost poetic now, a reminder to all that, despite the chaos, some things, like duty, would always remain. For Chris, the incident was nothing more than another part of the job. It wasn't about the confrontation or the crowd's reaction. It was about maintaining order, doing his duty, and never compromising his discipline, even when faced with unpredictable chaos. The palace grounds were peaceful once more, but the lesson had been learned. Respect for those who serve, whether in combat or standing guard, was something that had to be earned and understood. And for Jack, the morning after would bring a harsh dose of reality, one that would force him to confront the consequences of his actions. The story was far from over for him, but for now, the guard stood still, a symbol of unwavering resolve in the face of adversity. What do you think about the situation that unfolded at Buckingham Palace? Do you believe Sergeant Chris Williams made the right call when he responded to Jack's aggression? How would you have reacted if you were in his shoes? It's easy to talk about discipline and control from the outside, but in moments like this, real decisions need to be made, and the consequences can be far-reaching. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share where you're watching from and your thoughts on this powerful moment. Was there a time in your life when you had to maintain your composure in a difficult situation? How do you think discipline can change the outcome of a tense moment? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss tomorrow's story of courage, discipline, and respect from the Royal Guards. We post new, compelling stories every day, and we'd love for you to be part of our community. Join us and share your thoughts. Your perspective matters, and we want to hear from you. Make sure to click the bell icon so you're notified whenever a new story goes live. Let's keep the conversation going.